47 years ago, 1973. And you could see a picture of Nimkoi Baba. I mean, you can see me, and then if I make it bigger, say he's up on my wall. I don't know if you can see his picture. Anyway, so that was, I lived in his ashram in India in 2 different places, in Vrindavan, which is just south of New Delhi, and in Kinchi, which is in the Himalayas, just north of Nainital. I came to this ashram a committed atheist. I just thought anyone who believed in God was really foolish, and it was sort of, it's part of my New York, essentially, section of Jewish culture. There's Jews in New York who are very religious, who are Hasidic, and in my part of New York City, we made very light of these people, and we thought they were just delusional fanatics. So I was very surprised during my stay in this ashram to be opened up to a spiritual path that gave meaning to the word God that was very different than what I grew up with in Queens, New York. So Queens is part of Long Island, and we have an eminent scholar here today named Ken Blady, who is also was part of this community in New York. Anyway, that so I was very shocked to find out that I was introduced to this new spiritual philosophy. So what I've done today is prepared 24 slides which try to describe philosophy. I'm just curious of the 18 people other than me here. I wonder, has anyone else studied Advaita Vedanta? Has that been a study? Quite a few, one, two, like about 4 of you. So anyway, so this is an elementary course. So this is, I mean, so it's very hard to give slides for like 2 types of people. Some of you may be more advanced than myself and know more than myself. And then there are others that this may be the first time they're ever hearing it. So I'm not very good at Zoom. So once I start the slides, I don't want to get off of them because I'm not sure I'll be able to continue. So I wondered if anyone wants to say anything before the slideshow begins. And then I would ask Rita to mute everyone other than me, and then we'll come back to discussion of Advaita Vedanta. But before we begin the slideshow, Jonah, do you want to say something?
Yeah. I think, you don't need to divide it into beginners or advanced. Go to the essence. As if, anybody on this Zoom call was going to die in the near future, just give the, straight, most genuine, where you're at, your wisdom of Advaita Vedanta.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, I mean, as you're going to see in the second slide, I give 3 levels of comprehension of this path, and I'm like still a beginner, but I have some comprehension. It's in India, it's considered there are 4 yogas, and this is part of a system called Jnana Yoga, Jnana, and it's considered the most difficult path of yoga because there's a central thought in it that I am that, or I am God. So it's very dangerous because one can inflate the ego. If there's any ego left, you could think that your own ego is the God. So it's considered the most risky path of yoga. And, I probably made every mistake that can be made in this path, but because I've been 47 years, I've corrected some of my mistakes, but not all of them. So maybe in the discussion at the end, we can give each person's insights about about whether my interpretation of Advaita Vedanta is akin to your way of seeing it. Okay. Any other comments before we begin? I like what you said, Jonah. I'll try and be authentic. And neither beginner nor advanced, right? Just authentic. Any other comments? Marilyn, are you waving your hand or no? You're just getting your computer steady.
I'm asking if you had time and if you to talk about at any point if you had time to talk about death and dying in the
Okay,
tradition of Vedanta.
sure. I mean, as Jonah mentioned, that's a central part of the path is to die before you die. That's like the saying of this path, is that it's seen that everyone has a physical death at the end of their life, but it's seen that there's a moment called awakening, enlightenment, that's a death while you're still in the body. And that's really what this path is about. If you had a phrase, one phrase for it, it's to die before you die. And people that are awake, they seem to have no fear of physical death. So I often think of a Jewish comic from Long Island too, named Woody Allen. And he said, I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. So anyway, so that's basically my point of view at the moment. I'm still very much attached to my body and I'm not afraid of death philosophically, but I just don't want to be there when it happens. So anyway, particularly, yeah, both of my parents died in their 90s and both of them had painful moments toward the end. So I could see that, you know, part of me doesn't like pain. So, but these people that are, let's say, have woke up, they're woke people, they seem not to be upset by pain or dying process. So they have moved to another whole level that that certainly I have not achieved. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still, the key word, as you'll see in this path, is whether or not you identify with your body and mind. So I still am identified with my body and still identified with my mind. But if you can break that identification, that's dying before you die. Okay. Any more questions or should we start the slideshow? Okay, very good. So now this is going to be tricky. I'm going to try and put share screen and we'll see what happens. Share screen. There's MI. Okay.
Yeah.
So the people see the word am I?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So whatever speaking comes on, I think if I'm, anyway, so I don't know how to, now Michael, Steve spoke last, so his little face is coming up. But I think as long as it's just one space, can anyone not see the words am I? So everyone is seeing it, is that right? Okay. Okay, so that's the talk. Let's just go through the 24 slides. Okay, so this is what I talked about before. There are 3 stages of embodiment. So where I am basically at is understanding, and I'm trying to move to inner standing. Inner standing is an intuitive grasp of this. Understanding is a mental, conceptual representation. So I'm trying to move from understanding to inner standing. And then there's another whole third part of the path called realization. And realization is self-realization or enlightenment or the end of suffering or dying before you die. And that's only the third stage, has the real I. So there's a little pun, just the first 5 letters of realization are real I. So I can't hear anyone, but I'm assuming you hear me.
Yes.
Did people hear me? Good.
Yes.
For some reason, Michael is coming on my screen, but no one else is. Okay.
No, we hear you.
But here is the, good. Okay. So here is the man who founded this path. His name Shankaracharya. There were precedents before it, and he actually used the Vedas, but you know, no one knows exactly when he lived, but it seems people agree he lived to around 32 years. And these are the, the dates. He was definitely alive around when the 7th century, when the 700s turned into the 800s. And interestingly enough, what is in the picture is a small temple that still exists that he definitely attended. He wrote about going to a mountaintop in Kashmir. So this is in the very north of India. And at the temple, they say he founded this temple where he lived. I mean, so you can actually go visit it when you go to Srinagar. It's just like a one-day hike. You could either hike up the mountain, or at this point you could even drive up the mountain. And it's a temple devoted to Shankaracharya. So the way Shankaracharya is presented in India is through this type of iconography. So he was like a master. For some reason, they always have him sitting on a tiger skin, and they have him. Okay. So that was my cell phone. Sorry. Anyway, so okay. So they always have him having 3 white stripes on his forehead, and he, is a staff, and and he just looks very peaceful. So that's how the founder of this path. Now, this is the philosophy of the founder. I mean, he wrote so many works, but I'm giving it to you in one sentence on the next slide. So his basic theory was the non-duality of the Atman, what he calls Nirguna Brahman. Now, Atman is the Sanskrit word for the self, and Nirguna Brahman is the attributeless, formless absolute. So Rita at the beginning talked about the absolute. This is the word for the absolute. I mean, Brahman is considered in its absolute form attributeless and formless, and that's the word for it. And so basically, we as individuals in this theory are called jivas, and each jiva has inside himself an Atman, and that Atman is indistinguishable from Brahman. That's his theory in one sentence, and he wrote volumes, but that's the heart of what he taught. So now the most modern person who speaks our language that presents the path of Advaita Vedanta is named Ramana Maharshi, and he was alive when I was alive. You can see he lived to 1950. Of course, I was less than 5 years old when he left his body, but still, I mean, he is contemporary, and there's all these people that were impressed by his eyes, drawings that tried to express his enlightenment. And so this is like a particular drawing that was based on a photograph of him. And we're going to give some of his theories, which are more modern interpretation of Advaita Vedanta. So this is the moment that Ramana woke up. He was still 16 years old, and he had this awakening, and he moved from the little town he lived in India to a mountain in South India called Arunachala, and it's near a town called Tiruvannamalai. And after he moved there, he lived there until his death for the next 54 years. So he never left that town again. And anyway, you could see that there's some very unusual 16-year-old boy here. So this is what he looked like as an adult. That's the photo that made his painting, that made person took the painting from. So so as far as I know, Ramana Maharshi is the only one of this path that ever made it to a stamp. This is an Indian stamp, actually 2 stamps. One is a stamp of India, the other is a stamp, I guess, of Uttar Pradesh, I guess. Anyway, I'm not sure. But anyway, both the stamps made in India. And as far as I can know, no other, let's say, person who practiced Advaita Vedanta ever made it to the post office or made it up to a stamp for the post office. So this is Ramana's theory in the